Thanks for watching my video. Tonight I've got 3 eerie train stories that will mess with your head. If you watch until the end, tell me which story scared you most in the comments. Subscribe, you'll like it. I boarded the train close to midnight. The platform was silent, the lamps above me buzzing faintly. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of metal and dust. Every seat I passed was empty. My footsteps echoed as if I was trespassing in a place not meant for me. I chose a seat by the window in the middle of the car. The glass reflected my tired face and the dark blur outside. The train jolted, then began to move. I felt relief being alone, or at least I thought I was. The first stop came within minutes. The doors opened with a heavy hiss, but no sound followed. Then, from the shadows of the platform, a man climbed inside. He wore a gray coat and had a face I knew, but did not want to recognize. He didn't speak. He sat directly across from me, folding his hands in his lap, eyes fixed on mine. I swallowed and looked away, pretending to watch the darkness beyond the window. But I could feel his gaze burning into me. My chest grew tight. I'd told myself it was only coincidence, a stranger choosing the same spot. At the next station, the doors opened again. This time, a woman entered. Her hair was long, black, and wet, as if she had just stepped out of the rain, though the night outside was dry. She, too, sat opposite me, beside the man, her eyes locked on my face. I knew her as well, though my memory fought against it. The train pulled away. I wanted to move, to change cars, but my legs felt pinned to the seat. The silence was unbearable. The rhythm of the wheels on the tracks was the only sound, steady and merciless. Another stop. Another figure entered. He carried nothing, said nothing, and sat in the same row across from me. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Recognition cut through me like a knife. I had pushed him away years ago when he needed me most. I forced myself to breathe. I whispered under my breath, asking what they wanted, but none of them answered. Their stares were heavier than words. By the 4th stop, my hands were trembling. A teenager stepped in, shoulders hunched, hoodie pulled over his head. When he lowered it, my stomach turned. I remembered him. I remembered exactly what I had done. His eyes were not angry. They were disappointed, and that was worse. The car was filling, but no one else existed. No conductor, no other passengers in the other rows. Only them. Only the ones I thought I had left behind. I pressed my forehead against the window. My reflection looked back, pale and sweating. The glass vibrated with the train's speed, but the faces opposite me stayed still, locked in place. Station after station, the pattern continued. Each time the doors opened, a new figure appeared. A coworker I had betrayed for a promotion. A friend I had abandoned in a moment of weakness. A stranger whose trust I had broken. They sat shoulder to shoulder, silent, eyes unblinking. By then, the seats across from me were nearly full. Their presence pressed down on me, suffocating. I wanted to scream, but the weight in my throat kept me silent. The train kept moving into the night, and I knew the journey was far from over. The further we traveled, the colder the air grew inside the car. I rubbed my arms, but the chill stayed in my bones. The faces across from me were too familiar. Each one carried a memory I had buried. I tried to deny them, but memory is not something you can erase. The train slowed again. My stomach clenched before the doors even opened. This time, the figure that stepped inside moved slower than the rest. He was older, with lines carved deep into his face. His eyes were the worst of all. I had betrayed him when he trusted me without question. The shame of it flooded my chest until I could barely breathe. He took his seat without hesitation, directly in line with my gaze. There was no sound in the car besides the grinding of the wheels. No one spoke. No one blinked. Their silence crushed me more than accusations ever could. I forced myself to stand. My knees trembled, but I managed to pull myself upright. I wanted to run to the next car, but when I looked down the aisle, I saw darkness stretching endlessly. No doors, no passage, just blackness, swallowing everything past my row. I turned back, and the sight froze me. Every face across from me was leaning forward now, still silent, but closer than before. Their stares drilled into me, not with anger, but with the weight of disappointment. The train screeched into another station. The doors opened, my heart hammered as I waited. The final passenger stepped inside. It was me. He was my height, my build, my face. He walked slowly, each step echoing like a hammer in my chest. When he reached the row, he sat directly in the center across from me. His eyes met mine, and I saw no life in them, only judgment. I couldn't look away. My reflection in the glass had always been something I could control. A quick glance, a turn of the head. But this was not glass. This was real, sitting inches from me, breathing, watching. The train surged forward, faster than before. My reflection leaned closer, and in a voice just above a whisper, it spoke. You knew this ride was coming. The words sent a shiver through every nerve. None of the others moved. They remained statues, their eyes never leaving me. Only my double spoke. You took everything from them. Now you sit with them. I wanted to answer, to defend myself, but no words formed. My throat was dry, my tongue useless. The reflection tilted its head, studying me like I was a stranger. Then it smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach the eyes. This is your last stop. The train shook violently. The lights above flickered. For a moment I thought the car would tear apart. I clutched the seat, my nails digging into the worn fabric. Then, just as suddenly, the shaking stopped. The train slid into a final station. The doors opened, revealing nothing but endless blackness outside. No platform, no lights, no exit, only void. I looked around, desperate, but all the passengers stood at once. Together in silence, they turned their gaze toward the open doors. My reflection remained seated, staring at me with a patience that felt eternal. I understood then. This journey was not about reaching somewhere new. It was about facing what I had done, facing who I was. The others filed out, one by one, stepping into the dark without fear. Their shapes vanished instantly. Finally, only my reflection and I remained. He leaned back, folded his hands, and waited. The doors were still open. The void still called. My chest ached with a weight heavier than anything I had ever carried. I stood, legs shaking, and faced him one last time. He did not move. He only watched, as if to say, the choice was mine. I stepped toward the door. The air outside was colder than anything I had ever felt. And then the doors closed behind me. The train moved on, but I was no longer a passenger. Every night, at exactly 2:15 a.m., I heard it. The sharp, distant blast of a train horn. The sound cut through the silence of my street like it was right outside my window. The problem was, the railroad that once ran through our town had been gone for decades. The tracks were ripped up when I was still a kid. What I heard shouldn't have existed. The first time it happened, I thought maybe it was a dream. The second time, I sat up in bed and checked the clock. Same time, same sound. By the third night, I was wide awake waiting for it. When the horn echoed, I felt my skin prickle. Curiosity pulled me out of the house. I wrapped myself in a hoodie, stepped into the cool night, and listened. The sound drifted across the neighborhood, faint at first, then louder, like steel wheels grinding against invisible rails. My feet moved without thinking. I followed the noise past empty houses and dead streetlights until I reached the old railroad bed, the one covered in weeds and cracked asphalt. That's when I saw them. Ribbons of glowing steel appeared across the ground, stretching farther than I could see. They shimmered faintly, pulsing with light. And then, from the distance, a shape rushed forward. A train. It roared into sight, massive and impossible. The engine burned with a pale glow, and the cars behind it clattered, their windows black. The horn blared again, rattling in my chest. I froze, watching as sparks flew from wheels that didn't exist in the real world anymore. The train slowed as it neared me. Steam, thick and white, hissed into the night. A single figure stepped out from the open doorway of the first car. The conductor. He wore a uniform that looked older than anything I had ever seen. The dark coat buttoned up to his chin, a hat tilted low over his eyes. His face was pale, too pale, almost waxy. But his eyes, they seemed alive. "You've been hearing us," he said, his voice smooth and steady. I couldn't move. I couldn't even speak. He lifted a hand, and in his fingers was a small rectangle of paper. "A ticket. One ride," he told me. "No return." I swallowed hard. "Where does it go?" The conductor gave me a small, almost polite smile. "Forward." I glanced past him. Through the fogged windows I could see rows of passengers. They were sitting perfectly still, their heads slightly bowed. Something about them was wrong. I leaned closer and realized the truth. They had no faces. Just smooth, blank skin where their features should have been. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to run, yet something in me held me there. The horn sounded again, louder this time, vibrating in my bones. The conductor extended the ticket further, to side. I wanted to ask what would happen if I refused, but I couldn't get the words out. The faceless passengers sat motionless, waiting. The train hissed. The glowing tracks pulsed brighter, as if urging me on. I reached out, almost without realizing it, my fingers brushing the paper. It was warm, like it carried a pulse of its own. The conductor tilted his head. "Understand this. Once aboard, you will not step back onto the ground, you know. This path has no turn, only what lies ahead." I felt my throat dry up. The night air was cold, yet I was sweating. I glanced back the way I came, at the familiar houses, the empty street. Then I looked at the train again, its impossible light spilling into the darkness. And I had to choose. My fingers closed around the ticket. The second I touched it, the air changed. The world behind me, the familiar houses and streets, seemed to fade like mist. The glow of the rails grew stronger, pulling my attention forward. The conductor stepped aside, gesturing toward the open car. Board. I climbed the metal steps. The train's interior smelled of old smoke and rust. The faceless passengers sat in silence, rows of blank heads turned toward me as if they knew I had joined them. My stomach tightened. I wanted to speak, to ask where they were going, but my voice felt locked in my chest. The door clanged shut behind me. The train lurched. The horn blasted deeper and sharper than before, and the glowing world outside blurred into motion. I sat near the back, gripping the ticket so hard it crumpled. The passengers didn't move. They didn't breathe. They only sat. The conductor walked down the aisle, his shoes clicking softly against the floor. He stopped beside me. "You wonder who they are?" I forced out a whisper. "Yes. They are travelers who chose forward, like you." My skin prickled. "Where forward leads? What is it?" The conductor's eyes seemed to catch the glow from outside, glinting unnaturally bright. "You will see." The train sped faster. Outside the window, the world no longer looked like my town. The trees bent unnaturally, their branches stretching like arms. Lights flickered in the distance, then vanished. At one point, we passed a station. It looked broken, half collapsed, yet shadowy figures stood on the platform, reaching toward the train as we passed. I pressed my forehead to the glass. None of this made sense. When I turned back, one of the faceless passengers had shifted, its head tilted toward me. I froze. The skin where its face should have been seemed to ripple, like something underneath was pressing to break through. I stumbled from my seat. The conductor was suddenly there, blocking the aisle. "You must sit," he said calmly. "The ride is not finished." "I didn't agree to this," my voice cracked. "You took the ticket. That was your agreement." The horn blasted again, so loud it rattled my bones. The train jerked harder, faster. The faceless passengers leaned forward in unison, their smooth heads turned in my direction. My chest heaved. The conductor placed a gloved hand on my shoulder. "You cannot go back." I shoved him off and ran toward the next car. The door slammed behind me as I crossed. This car was different. The benches were empty, but the walls were lined with mirrors. I caught my reflection. At first I saw my face. Then slowly it began to blur. My features smeared as though painted with water. My eyes melted into smooth skin. My mouth disappeared. I staggered back, my breath sharp and shallow. My reflection was faceless. The horn wailed again. The train's light grew so intense it hurt to look outside. I clutched the wall, my ticket still burning in my hand. The conductor's voice carried through the car. "Forward has no end, only transformation." I screamed at him, "Stop the train," but it only moved faster. The mirrors showed row after row of me, faceless, sitting still, waiting. And I knew what was coming. I never believed old trains could move on their own, but the night we broke into that abandoned carriage proved me wrong. There were 4 of us. My name is Ryan. With me were Alex, Jordan, and Emma. We wanted a video that would stand out, something creepy enough to grab views. Everyone in town talked about the rusting train parked near the freight yard. No one dared go inside at night. That was exactly why we chose it. We brought flashlights, a cheap camera, and our phones. The carriage smelled like dust and wet metal. The floor creaked as we walked, and graffiti covered the walls. At first, it felt like nothing more than an old wreck. Emma laughed and said it was boring. Alex banged on one of the windows with his fist, and the sound echoed like a drum. Then the doors slammed shut. None of us touched them. The heavy metal locked us inside. Jordan pulled at the handle, but it would not move. Before we could argue, the floor shook. The train lurched forward. I nearly dropped my light. Outside the windows, I expected to see the freight yard sliding away. Instead, the night vanished. The glass showed something else, something impossible. The first thing I saw was water rising to the window level. My stomach twisted. I had almost drowned when I was 10, and now the train looked like it was sinking under a black lake. Emma pressed her face to the glass. She gasped, then backed away, covering her mouth. She wasn't seeing water. She whispered that she saw her childhood home on fire, flames curling out of the roof. Alex shouted that he saw nothing but a crowd of people staring at him, dozens of faces without eyes. Jordan kept pulling at the door until his hands bled. He didn't want to say what he saw, but his whole body shook. The train sped faster. The sound of wheels was wrong, like metal scraping on bone. I tried to steady my breathing. "It's a trick," I said. "Some kind of projection." But my voice cracked. The water outside grew higher, pressing against the glass like it would burst inside at any moment. Alex screamed at me to film everything. He said if we recorded it, maybe someone would believe us. His hands shook so badly the footage was nothing but blurs of faces and shadows. The lights overhead flickered, then went out. The only light came from the windows, each one showing a nightmare pulled from inside us. Emma sobbed, begging the fire to stop. Jordan crouched in the corner, refusing to look. Alex yelled that the faces outside were opening their mouths now, all of them whispering his name. I realized the train wasn't moving through space. It was moving through us. That was only the first hour of the night. The longer we stayed locked inside that carriage, the more it felt alive. The walls seemed to breathe, and the floor vibrated under my shoes like a heartbeat. None of us wanted to admit it out loud, but we all knew the same thing. This train was not running on tracks anymore. It was feeding on us. The windows changed again. My drowning nightmare grew worse. Now I could hear water rushing, gurgling against the glass as if the carriage was sinking deeper. I pressed my ear to the window and froze. On the other side I heard my own voice, choking and begging for air. Emma's window showed her old home. Flames crawled higher until her parents appeared in the window, trapped and screaming. She clawed at the glass until her nails tore. I pulled her away, but the vision only grew brighter, the fire lighting up the entire carriage like a torch. Alex tried to fight back. He shouted at the eyeless faces, telling them they weren't real. But the more he yelled, the more real they became. Their pale hands began to press against the window, leaving smears that looked wet. One of the figures started knocking from the other side, as if asking to be let in. Jordan finally spoke. His voice cracked. He said the train showed him the night his brother died. He saw the accident all over again, his brother crushed under twisted metal. He begged us not to look at his window, said it was worse if anyone else saw it. His words made my skin crawl. Minutes passed like hours. None of us had a phone signal. The camera stopped recording on its own. The only sound was the endless screech of the wheels. At some point, the air turned cold, and we could see our breath. Then the train braked hard. The impact threw us to the floor. When I stood up, the door slid open on its own. A hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit, leading into another carriage. We didn't want to go, but staying inside felt worse. We stepped forward. The next carriage had no seats, just mirrors. They lined both walls, tall and cracked, reflecting us in distorted shapes. My reflection stared back at me, but it didn't move when I did. It only smiled, teeth sharp and wrong. Alex cursed and smashed one of the mirrors with his flashlight. The glass shattered, but the reflection didn't vanish. It stepped forward out of the broken frame. Chaos broke out. Emma screamed. Jordan tried to run, but the door at the far end locked shut. Alex swung again at the figure, but his flashlight passed through it like smoke. The reflection lunged, and Alex fell, thrashing. When we pulled him up, his face had gone pale. His eyes kept darting to the mirror. He whispered that it took something from him. We dragged him forward into the next carriage. Inside, there were rows of seats, but each one held a passenger. Not living people, but mannequins. Their plastic heads turned as we entered, necks cracking in unison. Every mannequin wore an old ticket pinned to its chest. I read one way, no return. Emma lost control. She pushed past us, screaming she wanted out. She ran down the aisle. As she passed, the mannequins began to rise, stiff arms reaching. We chased her, but she tripped near the end of the carriage. The figures closed in. Alex and I tried to pull her back, but the mannequins dragged her down between the seats. When we ripped one off her, its plastic face split open, revealing a mouth full of glass shards. The others piled on. Emma's scream cut off like a switch had been flipped. Jordan bolted. He slammed into the next door and forced it open. We had no choice but to follow. Alex muttered that Emma's voice was still ringing in his ears, even though she was gone. The following carriage looked endless. The ceiling arched high above, and lights flickered far down the length. We walked carefully, but the floor kept shifting, stretching the distance. I felt like we weren't moving at all. Alex grabbed my arm and pointed. He saw his own body hanging from the ceiling, tied with ropes. The corpse twitched and looked straight at him. Alex broke down, clawing at his skin, swearing he could feel the ropes tightening around his neck. Jordan and I dragged him forward, but the more we fought, the more Alex resisted. Finally, he tore himself free and sprinted toward his own hanging body. I shouted, but he didn't stop. When he reached it, the lights snapped off for a second. When they returned, Alex was gone. Only the swaying corpse remained. Now it was just me and Jordan. His eyes were hollow. He mumbled that the train was never going to stop, that we were being peeled apart one by one. I tried to tell him we could make it if we kept moving. Deep down, I wasn't sure. At some point, Jordan collapsed against the wall, refusing to stand. He told me the accident that killed his brother had been his fault. He said the train wanted him to confess, to live it over and over. He begged me not to leave him, but when I looked at his window, I saw the crash myself. Metal and blood everywhere, his brothers screaming. Jordan crawled toward the vision, sobbing. Before I could grab him, the wall swallowed him whole, and he was gone. I was alone. The train slowed. The wheels screeched louder than ever. When it stopped, the door opened, and cold dawn light spilled in. I stepped outside. Behind me, the train groaned and rolled backward into the fog, vanishing into nothing. I stood on the empty tracks, shaking, alive but ruined. The others were gone, and no one would believe me if I told them. My phone still had the last clip Alex recorded, but when I opened it, the only sound was the train's wheels and the faint echo of our screams. I survived, but I never escaped. Every night since then, when I close my eyes, I hear the sound of metal scraping. I know one day that train will come back for me.